Okay, we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. Faraz here. Zach's here. Let us hear it, guys. Did you win? Are you in the process of winning? Do you have Joe Burrow tonight? Do you have Josh Allen tonight? Do you have Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon? There's a lot riding on Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Oh, man, there's too many. Too many. A lot of fantasy, big fantasy names tonight with the Bills and Bengals. This has, shootout written all over it.
Yeah.
But so did the Packers and Vikings. That also had, that didn't quite go as planned, that game, right?
It didn't materialize.
Not at all. Not at all. But if you're listening to this, I hope you're listening with a win in hand. Hopefully there's a bunch of champions listening to this, okay? Because you're listening because you want to hear more about how, this week went. If you lost, you might not be in the best mood today, and I totally understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking okay in our league.
Yeah. No.
We had so I'm in the championship in our league that we have together, the only league that matters, and looking okay, Zach. We're looking okay today.
No, I mean, I think you look really good. The way I always look at these games where it's like, one player versus one or two other players, that kind of thing. It's like, you have to put it in terms where it like seems super optimistic. It's like Joe Burrow just has to outscore Joe Mixon with a 9-point lead. And that's what it is for you tonight. So it's like, he has a 9-point cushion. Like, he can't lose, right? Joe Mixon hasn't had the workload since he put up those 55 points. What was it, week 11? I think that's what it was. So the odds of him getting back to that, I don't think they're very high. He's not going to have any type of workload that's going to get him those points where he's outscoring Joe Burrow by 9 points. If it's a shootout, I think you might be in very solid shape. Very good chances to win, this league.
This is the first time that so we put together this league this year,
right?
Handpicked everybody because it's like, you want a competitive league, you want people who are cool, and I feel like this year went by really well. Like, it was a competitive league, no complainers, everyone was chilling. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was no BS. We could have talked a little bit more shit, but I guess as more people know each other more as the years go on, it'll happen, right?
Right.
But we're talking about something not so likely to happen, and that's Joe Mixon having a huge game tonight. But another thing that wasn't so likely to happen was Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Two guys on the Bucs who have not come through, but all of a sudden come through. Hopefully not on your bench, Mike Evans and Tom Brady. Like, you got to be kidding me, man.
Chances are this was to win you out of your consolation bracket if you had Mike Evans or Tom Brady on your team, because they've been doing nothing all season.
10 catches, 207 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Like, talk about regression, catching up. Like, not the regression candidate that I was expecting to go off in championship week, right? Like, I can't imagine how many people had Mike Evans on their bench because they're just like, I can't trust this guy.
Right.
You had some sort of decent option. You're like, I'm going to roll him over Mike Evans because probably have more upside. You're talking about an offense who hasn't been able to score points. And then Tom Brady, 432 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, a rushing touchdown. And you look at what the Panthers did last week, right? They handled the Lions easily, right? And then they allowed Tom Brady and Mike Evans to just go ham. If you had either of these guys in your lineup this week, luckily, right? Because you would have to be in some dire straits to have Tom Brady or Mike Evans in your lineup this week.
Right.
You're probably taking home the trophy if that was the case.
Yeah, if you were in your championship, that is. Like I said, you probably win.
Of course.
Yeah, like for me, I definitely would have been winning my way out of a consolation bracket. You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. But this was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. I thought this was a pretty good matchup. They were going against the Panthers, who have a pretty good defense. And if you watch the game, it was literally the Tom Brady and Mike Evans show. I mean, Chris Godwin had 120 yards on 9 targets, 9 catches. But outside of that, like, there wasn't anybody else doing anything for the Buccaneers. And the Panthers actually had 2, I think, 10-point leads in this game.
Yeah.
So it's like the Panthers were in control. They just completely let go of Tom Brady and Mike Evans. And they finally connected on not 1, not 2, but 3 deep touchdowns. It's like, it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. This is just like a season's worth of production, from Mike Evans. Just something close to what we wanted to see from him all season, all materialized in this Week 17 matchup. And he hit 1,000 yards again this season. So he has 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons. It sure didn't feel like it. It's not going to feel like it even after this performance. Like Mike Evans was like a great fantasy receiver. Even though he did hit those 1,000 yards, he's been super reliable in that department. But this was a nice, at least he redeemed himself if you made it all the way to the championship with him. And there's a chance, like you said, that he was riding on your bench. How bad would that feel? Like, I couldn't imagine that.
Because if you lost in your championship game and Mike Evans was on your bench,
yeah,
all you had to do was just play him, and you probably would have won.
Yeah, but listen, there was reason after reason after reason not to start him because he was missing on all cylinders. You know what I'm saying? Nothing was working.
I'll say this, though. He's no stranger to winning people championship games because in 2020, he had a 10 for 181 and 2 touchdown game in Week 16, championship week in 2020. Yeah. I was on the receiving end of that, unfortunately, in 2 leagues, and I lost because of that. So yeah, he's no stranger to that. And then last year, he also gets it done the week before in the semifinals. So he kind of comes through at times during, when it comes down to it. But it was a tough one, man. If you have him on your bench, I'm feeling for you. I really am.
Being on the receiving end of a Mike Evans championship or playoff performance, it's the only reason you could pull a stat like that because it's just ingrained in your mind. Nobody forgets fantasy football beatdowns by single players. Like,
that's true.
It's just a terrible.
Alvin Kamara, did it to me that same year. Mike Evans.
I had him in my one league. So that was fantastic. It was on Christmas, like a Christmas present. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was on.
I wasn't even watching the game, but I was just watching the box score roll up, and I was like, "Oh, he has a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns." Like it got to 6 touchdowns. I was like, "You're kidding me, dude! This is great."
Unbelievable, man. And by the way, in that same game, DJ Moore also coming through big time. 6 for 117 and a touchdown. DJ Moore, man, fantasy football playoff hero this year. He was a wide receiver 6 from weeks 15 to 17, and he was consistent every single game. He was getting it done near 20 points in PPR.
And a touchdown in each game, and 3 good matchups, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Tampa Bay in terms of fantasy points allowed. But, you can't really discount that the way that Sam Darnold was playing too. It looked like they had a little connection going there. We were never worried about DJ Moore and the talent. It's always been the quarterback situation, but look what he can do with just steady quarterback play. If they can get an actual quarterback there in Carolina, imagine what his stock would do.
Maybe Baker Mayfield.
Season. Yeah, maybe like Baker Mayfield, something like that. No, Derek Carr is coming to town, and then we're going to be doing that whole thing again with like we did with Davante Adams this year, who we'll be talking about later in the show.
Davante Adams. Can you just, what? Let's just talk about that right now.
All right, you want to do it?
Yeah. Davante Adams, man, he had 0 problems with Jarrett Stidham.
Couldn't believe the way this game went. Like, it was so great to watch. I watched this game. This was the one I was tuned in on.
It was
even with
Red Zone. Great game.
Tuned into it. It was so fantastic. I couldn't believe it.
Jarrett Stidham going toe-to-toe with the 49ers the entire game.
Yeah.
Only 2 quarterbacks have thrown for 300 yards against the 49ers this year. Patrick Mahomes and Jarrett Stidham. Only 2 quarterbacks have thrown 3 touchdowns against the 49ers this year. Patrick Mahomes and Jarrett Stidham.
Okay. I would say the way that the offense was playing, in overtime, I wouldn't have been surprised. He should have thrown for 4 if he wasn't hit when he was releasing that one pass. Because he was going to Davante Adams. He was using Davante Adams like we wanted him to be used all season. I couldn't believe it. We were worried going into the week about whether he'd have enough volume touches or even just snaps, to be relevant this week. And now Josh McDaniels is probably kicking himself for not starting. It's called Jarrett Stidham over Derek Carr all season. You know what I'm saying?
7 for 153 and 2 touchdowns on 11 targets for Davante Adams. There was no resting starters in this one.
No.
Right? Like, it was only Derek Carr.
Yeah. And we saw Josh Jacobs. Did he go out with an injury and come back? Like,
he did.
Yeah. So there weren't resting anybody by any stretch of the word.
Exactly. He got banged up, but he came back in. Like, they were just like, no, we need you.
Yeah. You got 2 games left, buddy.
And he was just fine. He ended up scoring a touchdown. Like, he caught a few balls. Like, hopefully you didn't get too cute with them, either of them this week. Like, I was definitely a little hesitant to play Josh Jacobs this week if I had other decent options, right? Yep. And like that Ian Rappaport tweet, really threw me off, right?
Oh, that
Because I'm
happens
like,
every week, though. Those tweets that just randomly throw you off, like, oh, somebody's getting the start this week, and then they get 2 touches. So it's like,
yeah, it was bad. So if you started either your studs on the Raiders, it worked out.
Yeah, it didn't look like that defense was just shutting everybody down. You know what I'm saying? Like the 49ers defense actually got gashed by Jarrett Stidham. It's just hilarious. And of course, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Davante Adams. But Josh Jacobs came through also, like you said. I would understand more, if somebody said, "Oh, I started Josh Jacobs," and he didn't, he ended up coming through anyway. Then if somebody said, "Oh, I didn't start Davante Adams,"
Right.
because Davante Adams, even with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback and, all the questions surrounding the Raiders, like you can't ever not start Davante Adams. You can't bench him, I don't think, in any situation. And obviously hindsight's 2020. And we were worried about this going into the week, but I don't think there's ever a situation where you bench him if he's healthy.
I went up against Daniel Jones this week, but I think, like we talked about, I might be able to recover that, from that, as long as Joe Burrow has a good game tonight. But Jones threw for 2 touchdowns. He ran for 91 yards and another 2 touchdowns on the ground. Looks like he was the streaming quarterback to play this week. And if you were lucky enough to have him in your lineup, you probably won yourself a fantasy championship.
Yeah, no, this is the type of game you'll see from him. It's weird. I think he had a stat line just like this at the end of the year in his rookie season against the Buccaneers. If you remember, that was his first start. He ended up throwing for 4 touchdowns. He had 4 total touchdowns, something like this. Right. And it just reminded me of that performance because they smoked Indianapolis, and everybody's smoking Indianapolis nowadays. But, this was really good. It looks like Daniel Jones, and it was Indianapolis, like I said. He could be a starting quarterback. Obviously, it looks like they might have plans to bring Daniel Jones back. If this is the type of, obviously this was a, high scoring game for him. If this is the type of game that is possible with him paired with the rushing floor that he offers, is he a low end QB1 maybe moving into next season? If, the weapons stay relatively the same, or maybe they get somebody on the outside, even better for him as a wide receiver.
Well, apparently they believe in him because the reports are that they're going to try and work out a long-term deal with Daniel Jones. Right. Going into this offseason.
Did you see the clip?
Be very interesting.
Did you see the clip they had of Brian DeBall looking at Daniel Jones? What's called coming off the field, going to the sideline. They said, "Get somebody that loves you like Daniel Jones, or looks at you like Daniel Jones is looked at by Brian DeBall," something like that.
Right, exactly.
It looks like he's, perfectly at home, Brian DeBall, and at peace with the idea of having Daniel Jones as his quarterback, because maybe he reminds him of Josh Allen light, because they're both big quarterbacks that can move. Obviously he doesn't have the arm of Josh Allen, but I think Brian DeBall can make it work. It looks like at this point.
What if Daniel Jones gets his Stephon Diggs? What happens?
That's right. That's interesting.
Because when did Josh Allen get to the next level? When he got his true number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's
so I can see that happening this year. I mean, look at these guys that just look at what happened this week, right? Like we've been talking about Richie James this week, as the Giants wide receiver to start, right? And he came through. Very solid game, 7 for 76 and a touchdown, right? Yep. Like these wide receivers, he's making do with no name wide receivers this year.
Yeah, and that I think partially has to do with coaching, but also Daniel Jones also stepping it up and taking it to another level. Obviously not Josh Allen, but higher than he has been playing in his career. The turnovers are no longer really an issue for Daniel Jones. He's doing a good job protecting the ball, at least compared to what he was at the beginning of his career. But like you said, I think Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins will be on the team. I think maybe next year. It looks like they're going to be solid wide receivers. They could get somebody in front of them. They could be good plays too in terms of wide receivers, being fantasy relevant next season. There's no reason to think they can't be with Daniel Jones at quarterback because he's obviously comfortable throwing to them. I think you might be onto something, like you said, if he gets someone on the outside or a big name receiver, whether that's through the draft or free agency or trade. I'm not sure how they're going to go about it. But with Saquon Barkley still there, if they can lock him down with Daniel Jones, I think low-end QB1, maybe even a solid QB1 next season, if the offense can take another step forward. And I think that's definitely possible with Brian DeBall at head coach because he's an offensive guy. And I think that he can, raise the level of this offense even higher, take it up another notch.
100%. And, we can't, discount Kafka as well coming over from the Chiefs. Like there was a few things that we talked about before this season.
Right.
With him, Dable coming over from Buffalo. Like there were a few things that pointed in the direction of Daniel Jones, having a decent year. And, this was like the icing on the cake right here in your championship week. Saquon Barkley, though, did not help you this week at all.
No.
7.3 PPR fantasy points. Absolutely brutal. The Giants went up, and Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell ended up coming in spelling Saquon. So not ideal there.
Yeah.
Hopefully you were able to overcome that one, but that's not that. It does kind of suck, though.
Yeah,
No
it
doubt about
sucks. It's not a Saquon Barkley problem, like you said. It's a game script problem. It's just when the team goes up like that, they're not going to keep their starters in, especially when they're playing to get into the playoffs. Saquon Barkley there was no need for him to be on the field. I don't blame the Giants for doing what they did, but it's just tough seeing Daniel Jones go for 36 points and having Saquon have 7. Like, you got to figure something. Some of those points will be going to Saquon, even in the receiving game. He had negative receiving yardage in this game.
Going back to that 49ers Raiders game real quick, of course, the true number 1 overall pick, Christian McCaffrey, was going to come through for us. No, the true 101. Okay? There was only one true 101.
Right.
And that was Christian McCaffrey. 193 yards and a touchdown. And guess who didn't miss one game this year? This injury-prone running back who did not miss one game this year, blah, blah, blah. Now finishing as the overall RB2 in fantasy. Okay? So, for all the people who could not fathom to take McCaffrey at number 1, he is a huge reason you might be winning your league today if you had the balls to take him at the 101.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, I think if he had a full season in San Francisco, I think he's easily the 101. Obviously he was good on the Panthers, but he didn't have that ceiling. And now he's hitting that ceiling with the 49ers. They have the perfect quarterback for Christian McCaffrey to get it done. And Brock Purdy's no slouch. It's not like he can't throw the ball downfield. We just saw it yesterday. But he's been consistent. He targets the running backs. He's doing everything he needs to do, getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers. Christian McCaffrey, obviously the best on that team. Do you think he's a 101 next year? I say yes. And I think that's like flying colors. Yes. I mean, I don't think there's anybody else who could take over him. So I think
he's the 101.
That's what we're looking at again next season, assuming nothing changes. I don't think they're going to draft any running backs or add anybody to that room that's going to take away his touches. Even if he doesn't get, a full complement of snaps, it seems like he can get it done regardless. So I like Christian McCaffrey next season as a 101, but definitely this game, talk about coming through. Like, he looked really good again. Is it any surprise to us? No, but yeah, you're definitely living it up if you took Christian McCaffrey this season.
Yeah, I feel good because I was pounding the table for this, and
yeah,
the amount of pushback that people have given me over that, it was more pushback than anything else.
Yeah,
that I've said this offseason.
Look back at this now. I know hindsight's 2020. How stupid, and I'm not saying people are stupid, but how stupid do people sound betting on an injury that this guy's going to get injured? That he has.
Look at Jonathan Taylor. Look at Jonathan Taylor. He was hurt multiple times this year.
Yeah.
Look at Saquon. Saquon played all year.
What was the principal argument for people against Christian McCaffrey? It was the injury history. It's like, how do you bet on an injury with a guy that's this talented? I don't get it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it was like, look at the injuries themselves. Look a little bit deeper. These weren't catastrophic injuries. They weren't knee injuries, right? They weren't like foot injuries, lower body injuries, hamstring and, like shoulder and like, injuries that you can get over. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
Yeah. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out real quick. I really didn't see this game coming from Brandon Aiyuk this week. 9 for 101 and a touchdown. Brock Purdy, man, 2 touchdown passes in 5 straight games now. I didn't see this game script like we were talking about it, right? Like, I didn't think the 49ers would need to throw a whole lot in this game. The Raiders withstood them. Like, they kept it competitive, and Aiyuk went off. Kittle actually took a little bit of a back seat in this one, right? Not something that I expected either. Right. He caught that touchdown, but didn't do a whole lot else, right? But yeah, man, it goes to show, man, Brandon Aiyuk is just a really, really good wide receiver, right? If they get any sort of, good quarterback play, like, Aiyuk is going to get it done.
They had that. Yeah.
And right now, Brock Purdy, he's just getting it done straight up.
That's it. Brock Purdy's in a perfect situation. You just look at it like good wide receivers, fantastic running back, very good tight end, good offensive line, fantastic defense. Like, it's going to be easier for him in the 49ers offense with the defense that they have there in San Francisco than in any other team, I think, for him to do what he's doing. And he's doing exactly what he's being asked to do. Keep in mind, Brock Purdy had, I think it was like 49 passing yards halfway through the second quarter. He didn't throw hardly at all, at least in terms of yardage. And Brandon Aiyuk had 1 catch for like 3 yards and a touchdown. going in this like halfway through second quarter. On the last drive, to get it tied to take the lead, before the game went to overtime. Brandon Aiyuk had like 4 catches for 50 yards. Like that was humongous for his fantasy day. Obviously, he would have been fine otherwise. He was having a good game with Brock Purdy by his own standards because he's been pretty quiet the past couple of weeks since Brock Purdy has been a quarterback. But he just dialed right into Brandon Aiyuk. I think he had 4 catches on 5 targets out of 6 total plays that they ran. So he was dialed into Brandon Aiyuk that he can get it done. It looks like Brandon Aiyuk's a really good receiver. I'm not sure what the situation is going to be at quarterback for next season, but I think regardless, we have to be interested in Brandon Aiyuk, right?
Yeah, for sure. Trey Lance is going to be the quarterback.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay. Just hypothetical. If Brock Purdy goes to the Super Bowl, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if Brock Purdy goes to the Super Bowl, do you think there's questions? Like maybe we trade Trey Lance?
There's going to be a ton of off-season questions. Yes.
Yeah. I think that would be a serious consideration for me.
Trey Lance is going to start week 1.
All right. We'll see.
There's
so much to happen in between now and then.
I know. There is.
But,
there is.
Yeah. And
this is the early call. The early call.
That's probably the safest bet. I mean, you look at it.
Even if Brock Purdy ends up winning the Super Bowl with them.
Okay, my pick would change. If Brock Purdy goes to the Super Bowl, I think there's a question.
There's going to be questions. Ain't no doubt about that.
I would look at it like, okay, Trey Lance, obviously we haven't seen a whole lot, but with Brock Purdy, you can just obviously be a Super Bowl contender now. I wonder if you can't get first-round picks for Trey Lance if you go trade him to a team that needs a quarterback. Like
Trey Lance is the next one, with talking about doubting CMC, talking about doubting Jalen Hurts, talking about doubting AJ Brown, talking about doubting all these people. He's the next one.
All right.
I feel like he's the next one where people are just going to count him out and he's going to come through.
All right.
I don't know. I have the feeling. All right. The number 1 running back in fantasy football this year, Austin Ekeler. Of course, the man of the people. He's going to come through championship week. He was the overall RB1 in championship week as well. The dude has been killing it all year and came through. He knew exactly what he was doing, right? Yeah. He's extremely aware of fantasy championship week, right? He had one of his best games of the season for the people. He put out a post on Instagram like a couple days ago, like early in the weekend, saying that he'll be good to go for the fantasy championship, like with his championship belt in hand.
Yeah.
So he's just the man. Like there's no other player who embraces fantasy football like Austin Ekeler. Like he's literally on a fantasy football podcast every week. So,
right.
He embraces it and he comes through. Like with every touchdown that he scored yesterday, he scored 2 touchdowns on the ground. He literally is thinking about all the fantasy championships that he's winning people.
Right. Yeah. This is like he said it. I put it in the graphic here. He's like the CEO of fantasy football. You know what I'm saying? Like this guy, he's fantastic as a player for fantasy football, but also just, he plays fantasy football. He knows what's going on. He's the anti-Miles Sanders, and that's fantastic, because he's super consistent, super good production, and he knows that the fantasy community is relying on him. And giving us the early injury update, like you said earlier in the week, not leaving any doubt he's going to play. And not only that, but coming through with not just 1 touchdown, but 2 touchdowns and 100 yards on the ground. That was the second highest yardage total of the season in terms of rushing yards. There's not much more you can ask for out of your running back 1 in Austin Ekeler. This was just a great performance. Like you said, it's awesome seeing him succeed because when he succeeds, we succeed. And he does very well, and he's very happy about it. You pretty much summed it up right there. Austin Ekeler, he is the man. And
this is a three-way timeshare in this game. Right. There were three total running backs who got a ton of touches in this game. Okay, so he still came through regardless. It didn't even matter.
You look at it. Larry Roundtree had 10 carries, just as many as Austin Ekeler.
Yeah, but he had absolutely terrible.
Yeah, he had how many fewer yards? 107 fewer yards. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So not to crap on Larry Roundtree, but Austin Ekeler's that dude.
Hey, man, it is what it is. Rhamondre Stevenson, man. Talk about a guy who got you to the dance, but when you get to the dance, he couldn't come through. He was averaging almost 7 targets per game, and then all of a sudden in week 14, that dropped to 3 targets, 5 targets, 4 targets, and he had a total of 10 receiving yards over the last 4 weeks. This is what he has. This is how his floor has remained so high all year, the receiving usage. And it literally disappeared over the last 4 weeks. And this is not something I was expecting at all for him. Also, Damian Harris, severely cut into his workload in this game. It does seem like the workload, throughout the whole season might have caught up to him a little bit. He did talk about that, like that he is feeling it, all the work, throughout the season, but he's also made some questionable mistakes the last 2 weeks, right? With the lateral 2 weeks ago to Jacoby Myers, like he could have just went down. And then last week he lost that fumble at the goal line to lose the game against Cleveland. So that wasn't good either. Right. So was it Cleveland? Was it Cincinnati?
Cincinnati.
Right. That's right. Yeah. So not great. So he just couldn't come through. I mean, he was awesome all year long. So, and he probably got you to the playoffs, but hopefully he was able to, at the end of the day, hopefully he was able to, kind of sneak his way through to a championship if you had some other guys come through for you.
Yeah. I'm not worried about Rhamondre Stevenson. I think long term, I think next season he's going to be just fine with the Patriots. I don't think he's falling out of favor with Bill Belichick or anything. Damian Harris did come back. Yeah, obviously it doesn't help when you fumble the game away, and you have questionable mistakes like that. But I don't think this is like any form of punishment. The Patriots were playing pretty comfortably against Miami, especially once Teddy Bridgewater went out. But I think that this is just one of the less inspiring storylines at the end of the fantasy season, because between weeks 5 and 11, he had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, between weeks 5 and 12, 5 top 10 performances. Since week 13, he has 1. And then the rest are lower than RB40, except for one where he finishes RB18 against Buffalo. So it's like, this was a terrible fall off. I don't think you saw this coming. I didn't see this coming. So why this happened, you can't really be sure, but it looks like it's just tough. This is one of the things you can't really project. That's just the way it fell for Rhamondre Stevenson. And like I said, I'm not worried about him next season. Are you worried about next season?
Am I worried about him? There's definitely questions in terms of what kind of workload he's going to get. Right? Are they going to bring in somebody who is a better pass catcher? Right? Like, will they have somebody to complement him on later downs? If Ty Montgomery never got hurt early in the season, would he even have gotten this role? Would he even have gotten the opportunity to take over that role? Not to say that he's not a better pass catcher than Ty Montgomery. That's not the point, right? The point is that, would he even have gotten the opportunity? So I think there's some questions. Is Damian Harris even? I think is Damian Harris a free agent?
I think he's a free agent. Yeah.
Well, let me just confirm.
If he was a 2019 pick, he should be a free agent.
He's set to be a free agent. Yeah. So, there is a path for Rhamondre to get a similar role than he got this year. Bill Belichick showed no hesitation to give him 90% of snaps in a bunch of games this year, and that never happens.
Yeah.
With the Bill Belichick running back. So he obviously likes Stevenson, but he couldn't come through when it mattered most. I'm just, as we're talking about it, I'm thinking about the trades that I made in our league.
Yeah.
Okay. And I traded some studs away. Obviously I want studs to return also.
Yep.
But the studs that I traded away was Rhamondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard, Chris Olave, Juju.
All right.
Juju might not be a stud.
3 of 4 of them I'd say are not studs. When I think stud, I think like Stephon Diggs. I mean, before the season, you would have said Mike Evans, but even Chris Godwin, I'd say is a stud. Juju, not so much.
Well, when I traded them,
I guess they were on a hot streak. Yeah, you could say that.
Chris Olave, when I traded him, was probably at his peak, and he was a high. He was being ranked as a high wide receiver too at that time.
Right.
But my point of me bringing that up is that I got really lucky in terms of Rhamondre shit in the bed championship week.
Yep.
Tony Pollard not even playing championship week. Juju shit in the bed championship week, and Chris Olave also. Obviously he fizzled out a big time on that offense. So, sometimes at the end of the day, you just got to get lucky, and a lot of studs didn't come through this week, right? So you could have the best team on paper, but like if they don't come through, you have no control over that. You never know what's going to happen. So whether you win or lose, there's going to be some sort of luck involved, right? Like this week, my opponent had a couple guys who just didn't do well, right? He had Juju in his lineup. He had, a couple other guys who didn't come through, and guys I was afraid of. Like he had DK Metcalf going up against the Jets. So, a lot of things can happen, that, you're looking at a really good team, but you're like, man, like my guys didn't come through. Right.
Yeah.
So one guy that did come through for me this week, though, was Travis Etienne. Right. Once the Jaguars were up, though, that was it for him. only 38% of snaps.
He did his work.
He did his work. He still gave you what you need, right? Like 140 yards and only 12 touches. He had that long touchdown, but he could have had like a 35-point game, right? If this game was competitive at all.
Yeah. This was interesting for me because the Texans took a bunch of teams down the wire. They went on a streak of taking the Cowboys down the wire in a game they should have won, going against the Chiefs and having a shot against them. It was down to the wire, then beating the Titans outright. I was expecting this to be close, at least relatively close, just because it's the divisional matchup. Obviously the Jaguars didn't need this, but it was just a shellacking. we thought this would be a good day for Travis Etienne, and by any rate, it was. Absolutely could have been bigger against this defense. Snoop Connor had that one touchdown. Good for him. But if that would have gone to Travis Etienne, that might have made the difference in some people's leagues. But it absolutely could have and should have been a bigger game for Travis Etienne. It wasn't close at all. So I was a bit disappointed, even though it's probably difficult to be disappointed in the Texans because they're pretty low right now. I was a bit disappointed by the performance they put up because they didn't even hang with the Jaguars at all. One thing I did note, though, Travis Etienne obviously doing very well, is that the Jaguars look really, really good. They're leaving no doubt at this point in these games that they played these last few weeks. The way the Titans are playing, the way the Jags are playing, they should be cruising, to a divisional championship at this point.
Yeah. And, it's funny because like a lot of their guys didn't come through, like the Jaguars pass catchers,
Evan Ingram,
including Evan Ingram, which I was kind of surprised about. Like maybe if this was a more competitive game, they could have got it done, but we knew that Zay Jones and Christian Kirk had tough matchups. So we were off of them this week.
Yeah.
But I thought Evan Ingram was going to come through because of it, because Houston hasn't been great against tight ends. So I thought he was going to be the target funnel in this game, but they didn't really need to pass it a whole lot. And, also on top of that, like they pulled Trevor Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
Like, so he wasn't in the game for a big chunk of it. That definitely affected that as well. So it kind of sucks that, the Jaguars didn't have a whole lot of reason to keep their starters in once they were up, but it is what it is. Evan Ingram, he was having a huge year, especially at the end of the year, and then he couldn't come through when it mattered most. Let me ask you about Travis Etienne. Is he somebody that you're going to be targeting next season?
I think you have to at this point, because now, I mean, there's no question. Like coming in this season, we're like, how is James Robinson going to factor into this? Obviously he's not on the team anymore. And I don't think they're going to draft anybody that's going to be, enough worth consideration that we have to think twice about Travis Etienne. I'm not taking Travis Etienne as like a high-end RB1,
right?
But I'd take him as an RB1. I could see him sneaking into the first round, especially the way this offense has looked. If they continue to look good in the playoffs, which I think they're going to make, and if they add more weapons, in the draft or something like that, or they get better on the offense, which I'm assuming is going to happen. Doug Peterson has him playing very well. I think Travis Etienne, we're looking at a back-end first-round selection for Travis Etienne. He has a really nice upside. He just needs to see more touches. Obviously, the only thing that was concerning this year was the workload. It wasn't always there. I want to see that he can get that and maintain that over, a longer span than he did this season. But I think regardless, if you're shooting for upside, if you're going to be drafting for upside, which you always are, especially in the first round, Travis Etienne's going to be an attractive pick.
He, I have two concerns with Etienne. The first one is that he's not extremely involved in the pass game. Actually, that is the only concern that I have with him. He wasn't extremely involved in the pass game. That was like, 3 targets a game. He does catch them, right? But wasn't overly involved in this offense. So that's a little bit concerning.
You think that can change? I feel like it can.
It can, but we have no evidence that it will.
That's fair.
Right? Yeah, and that would be my concern. I don't think there's one thing that you can point to that would lead me to believe that he'll get more targets next year. Can it happen? Sure. But we just won't know why. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess with Trevor Lawrence, it is a downfield attacking offense.
We had a huge sample this year with Etienne playing 90% of snaps. So if you're on the field for every passing down, you're running a route on almost every passing play, that is enough for me to say, like, okay, you should get targets. And he got less than expected. So not ideal.
But though you do say that, if he is on the field and running those routes, there's definitely room for improvement, and you can't ever rule that out completely. So if you're taking an optimistic view with it,
Yeah.
His catches could go up. His targets could go up.
It can.
Yeah.
It can. Yeah. My concern is like within a large sample size of you running as many routes as you are, if you're not getting targeted, it's a little concerning for me. Now, I love Etienne because he is an electric playmaker, right?
Yeah.
Like,
did you see him on that touchdown?
It's over. Yeah. He knew
like,
exactly.
Nobody was catching.
I feel like as soon as he touched the ball, as soon as he got the handoff, he knew. Because he hit that hole, boom, out.
Yeah.
He's an explosive playmaker. And that's and on top of that, being on a probably improved offense next year.
Yeah.
I think he could be an RB1 pretty easily. I would assume that he's not going to go in the first round. If I had to guess right now, I would think he's a mid to late second round pick, which I would be ecstatic about that price. I have a feeling that's where his ADP will end up. But yeah, no, I think that there is room for him to be a high upside RB1. If his pass catching goes up a little bit, and if this offense takes a step forward, I wouldn't be surprised if he's top 5 next year. If he finishes top 5.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either.
He has that upside.
Yeah, we've been saying that all season.
Zach, I made another last-minute lineup change in our league yesterday.
Yeah.
I picked up Jamal Williams on waivers because my opponent this week dropped him early on in the week, maybe because of the possibility of the knee injury, right? But also because Jamal hasn't really been doing his thing lately, right? His last big game was in week 11, but he was off the injury report this week. They were playing the Bears. So I picked him up just in case, right? See if I could want to make a last-minute decision. So I had the option to throw him in my flex over Hollywood Brown. And this is a PPR league, right? So it took some cojones for me. But, and I'm not even lying, okay? Number one, I saw him dancing pregame. Okay, the NFL account on Twitter, they put out a video of Jamal dancing pregame. And I'm just like, yo, this guy looks so relaxed right now. Like, I just feel like he's going to have like a good game. I'm not even joking. Okay.
Sometimes this is what it comes down to for fantasy football.
This is my process of it, like how to figure out what the tiebreaker is going to be between two guys. Okay. His vibe just captivated me. Okay. And you already know Jamal Williams is one of my favorite players in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
So, and then number 2, Justin Jackson was inactive. So I'm like, okay, I thought I needed upside because the team I was going up against, like Richard's team is a good team, right? So I'm like, all right, you know what? Hollywood Brown, how much upside does he really have with Colt McCoy? I'm sorry, not even with Colt McCoy. With
David Blau. David Bluff? Is that his name? Like, I don't even know how you pronounce his last name.
David Blau.
He's played like on a bunch of different teams, started a couple different times. I haven't figured out how to say his last name.
David Bling Blau. Bling Blau is his name.
David Bling Blau. Yeah. Okay.
Bling Blau. And so Justin Jackson was inactive. So I thought I needed some upside. And last minute, I pulled Hollywood out of my flex and I put Jamal in. 22 carries for 144 yards and a touchdown. That might have been the move that won me my championship. Because if I didn't do that, going into tonight, it would have been 50-50.
You'd be down 1 point. And it would come down to Joe Burrow just outright outscoring Joe Mixon. Which still,
obviously
I like those odds,
I would have the upper hand there, I think.
Yeah.
But you never know, right? Joe Mixon could score 2 touchdowns and outscore
sweating a lot more than you are right now.
I would be sweating 100%. 100%.
It's funny too because Jamal Williams had that type of game and DeAndre Swift got it done too. Just hilarious. I couldn't believe that. Okay, maybe I could have believed it. But you talk about the way he scored those points, which you can get into. It is pretty insane as far as logistically how much he was on the field and the amount of points he put up.
We talked about how good Travis Etienne looks when he gets the ball.
Yeah.
No one looks as good with the ball in their hands more than DeAndre Swift. Like, no. He looks so good. Like, when he gets the ball in his hands, like, he's like butter out there, dude. Like, the game just seems so easy for him. He scored 27 PPR fantasy points on only 35% of snaps. He's like the only running back in the league where that's possible. And I checked, by the way. Only Jerick McKinnon is above him in fantasy points per touch this season.
Right. Like... And this is why it makes me so upset to see them use him the way that they do. Obviously, he produced despite the workload that he had this week. But he just looks so good with the ball in his hands. I can't believe they don't use him more than they do. DeAndre Swift deserves a higher workload. And obviously, Jamal Williams is good. Yes, he had 22 carries. Jamal Williams is worthy of that workload. But DeAndre Swift, you just have to get him the ball more. Like, what? And obviously, he was inactive in this game. Justin Jackson should be an afterthought. When you have these two guys in the backfield, like, why are you giving Justin Jackson touches at this point? Obviously, it didn't happen this game. DeAndre Swift came through for you in your championship if you needed it. But, just the way that he produced, like you said, he hardly played and he did this good. Could you imagine if he got like 70% of snaps? Like, what would we be looking at in fantasy football? This would be a monster of a running back. I think even better, like rivaling Austin Ekeler, rivaling Christian McCaffrey at this point.
100%.
If he stays healthy. Like DeAndre Swift is just ridiculous. And I put it in the graphic here. He's smooth like butter, like you said.
Yeah, he really is, man. And it's one of those now he's going to be one of the biggest conundrums in drafts next year.
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about upside? You want to talk about a floor? I think that's going to be a really big discussion.
It's like, what do you do, right? It's almost impossible to figure out what they're going to do with Swift, because you could chalk it up to injury this year, but he's been fine. He hasn't been on the injury report.
Yeah.
And it's tough, man. Like, it's tough to figure out, because no matter who is on the field, it doesn't matter. It's not like if Jamal Williams is off, hurt or something like that, you're like, oh, okay, DeAndre Swift is going to get all the work. Like, okay, you don't know that, right?
No.
Also, it's worth noting that Jamal Williams is going to be a free agent. He's set to be a free agent this offseason. So,
yep.
DeAndre Swift, we'll see. It really depends on what that running back room looks like going into next year.
There's going to be so much at play for DeAndre Swift. Like you said, it's not just injuries, it's the way he was used. Jamal Williams may or may not be there. The people around him, we've seen the production with very minimal snaps. We've seen him go up in snaps and not perform as well. Like, this is a true ceiling floor pick. I don't know. Like, I feel like DeAndre Swift at this point going into next season is a guy I'm only taking if he drops far enough. I don't know how much I trust.
I hear you. It's a risk, man.
Yeah.
It's a risk.
I want to trust him because I'm a big DeAndre Swift guy. I was pretty much this whole season. But I don't know if I could justify him even in the second round. I feel like that's a big risk. And it could pay off, but it could also come back to bite you.
Yeah. I don't think he's going in the second. After this year, I don't see it.
I think he was going in the second, just this past season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This season, I feel like going into the season, I think it was very justified.
It was warranted. Yeah.
Because of how he was used the year before. But yeah. And it's funny because at the end of the day, like, it wasn't injuries at the end of the year that limited him. Or maybe it was that we don't know of. I don't know. We still don't know. But anyway.
Yeah. I don't understand how he would only get like 6 carries a game like he was getting. But,
So he was number 2 in fantasy points per touch this year. Number 1 was Jerick McKinnon. Okay.
Yeah.
And McKinnon was was he the best late season waiver wire pickup?
Yeah, by a mile.
Right?
I don't think it's a question at this point.
Like, my guy had 7 touches in this game, but scored 2 touchdowns through the air. And by the way, since week 14, he's the overall RB1 in PPR.
And that's all pretty much via passing, catching passes. Like, that's it. Jerick McKinnon, this is a guy that wasn't on rosters, like you said, like week 12. Like, nobody really had him. You were starting him maybe, just in a bad spot. But since then, he's a touchdown machine. I don't know what the heck happened. Patrick Mahomes just suddenly dialing into him. But, it was another close game against the Broncos. So they had to keep their foot on the pedal. And that was good news for Jerick McKinnon. But it doesn't look like it matters whether Jerick McKinnon gets 10 targets and 8 catches or 3 targets and 2 catches. Like, he's liable to score a touchdown pretty much every time. He's scoring a ton of points on not a whole lot of work. You look at it, he had 7 touches on 8? Yeah. 2 touchdowns on that. He's a touchdown machine. He is the waiver wire pickup, obviously, of the season, I think, at this point. I mean, you could maybe make a case for a guy like Kenneth Walker, but, like, in the circumstances that you're probably going into, especially with the fantasy playoffs that started week 14 or 15, right? Like, this is a guy that has been doing it for you ever since you picked him up, and hopefully you got your hands on him. When you picked him up, you probably didn't feel like it was a big steal. I mean, unless you got him after that 30-point, the first 30 of 2 30-point performances. I picked him up before that. It didn't really feel like much of a steal, but he's been getting it done. It looks great. Like, I'm not sure how much we could trust him next season, but he's doing his thing this season. That's all that matters.
I can't wait to see who the Chiefs draft at running back this year.
Yeah.
That's going to be exciting to see. And he's going to be overdrafted, of course.
Is there anybody that you're eyeing up that you think would be an ideal fit maybe coming out of this draft?
Not yet, because I haven't really gone in yet on these
That's fair.
On these running backs just yet. But I cannot wait to do that. That's like my favorite thing to do. I love looking at these prospects and then, sizing them up and figuring out where they fit and like what their skill set is. And honestly, man, the last 2 years, I think I've done a pretty good job in terms of evaluating these guys. Like A lot of the running back sleepers who I, kind of picked out, like a lot of them been coming through, man. And when they get opportunity, they've been doing their thing. So I'm looking forward to doing it again.
I think one of those guys was Tyler Algier, right? I think you
was.
had him as a sleeper. So there you go. You can hit on that one because he had another good week this week.
Hell yeah, man. Now we have a two-week sample size of him being the lead back for the Falcons, right? 20 for 83 in this game and a touchdown. I want to know what his price is going to be like next year. Like, I'm really curious of where he's going to land. Like, I would think it's going to be in the middle rounds. But we'll see. I don't know. Cordell Patterson, like, most likely will be back next year. I was looking at his salary, $3.75 million in dead cap if they cut him, but his salary is only 4.25. So I don't think it would really make much sense to cut him, in my opinion. But yeah, Algier was one of my sleeper running backs in this class. One of the reasons why I liked him is because last year, highest yards after contact per attempt. And guess what? Among all running backs, rookie running backs this year, Algier has the highest yards after contact per attempt among all this year's rookie running backs, including Kenneth Walker, including, actually, so Breece Hall, if he had 100 rushing attempts, maybe he would have eclipsed that. But
don't
he only
forget
had,
about Breece Hall.
70 rushing attempts. You know what kind of sucks though with the Breece Hall situation? I'm honestly going to be avoiding him next year.
Do you think Donovan Knight has carved out a role?
No. It's all because of the ACL.
Oh, okay.
It's all because of the ACL. The year after ACL injuries, I just learned to just avoid these running backs. And as much as I love Breece Hall, dude, you know,
especially as a guy on your team too. You know, what
I mean, we've seen this story before with a lot of good running backs. The year after an ACL, it's just like I'm just avoiding.
Yeah,
Saquon, J.K. Dobbins. It's just, we were avoiding J.K. Dobbins this year for a reason. And, there was multiple reasons for that.
Yeah.
Besides the ACL with J.K. Dobbins. But even with Saquon, I was high on Saquon the year after his ACL because I just thought he was a freak.
Yeah.
But if someone like Saquon isn't going to be able to do it, I just feel like the only person who was ever able to do it was Adrian Peterson, right? And that's like a sample size of one the year after having a monster year. So, yeah, I think Breece Hall is going to end up being drafted high. Unfortunately, I'm going to avoid for redraft, obviously.
And to go back, obviously we're talking about Breece Hall. I'll get back to that. But Tyler Algier, kind of just hitting on him real quick. I think he's, like you said, he'll be the later round running back. I think he's going to be a dead zone running back. And he's kind of going to remind me,
I can see it.
Obviously not the situation of J.K. Dobbins. It's not like he's coming off an injury at this point, but I could see him being valued the same way. Kind of like a low RB2 with upside. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not. But if Cordell Patterson's still there, I'm not super excited about his upside. So I think he's going to fall in the dead zone, and you might be able to get away with taking him. He might be a value. Obviously, we'll see how the offense looks going into next season. The offensive line did get better in Atlanta, but with Breece Hall, it sucks because I actually forgot about Breece Hall until you just mentioned him. I'm not sure if I'm going to be targeting him either. He's not going to be like I have a pinpoint on him. Like I want to pick up Breece Hall. That's the way he's going to be. We saw J.K. Dobbins. He was supposed to be ready, I think, for the beginning of the season. And then his recovery didn't go as good as it could have been. He ended up coming back really late. We got to see, even if Breece Hall does make a full recovery, there's a chance that he might not be ready for the first couple of weeks. So there's all that risk baked into it. That's going to cause his price to drop. At the right price, he might end up being a value, but do you think his ceiling is like relatively low? He's not going to be close to what he was doing this season?
I would say so. I think, I don't know if it's relatively low, but I would say that it's not as high as what his ceiling could be. I don't think he has top 5 upside. And if I'm going to be drafting a running back in like the top 2-3 rounds, like I want them to have top 5 upside.
All right. So you
if
don't
not,
think
I'm taking a wide receiver.
Yeah. So you don't think he has top 5, season long upside, but like a weekly.
Not next year. I don't.
Okay. Do you think he would have
weekly?
Top
of course.
I guess you could say that for anybody.
I mean, Jerick McKinnon, is hitting like top 5 like every
case
week.
In point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's if Breece Hall, like just seeing what he did in this limited sample size this year and what kind of prospect he was, if you didn't have an ACL injury, he would be a mid first round pick for me in fantasy if he didn't tear his ACL.
I think so. Yep.
Okay. And you mentioned J.K. Dobbins. He just had his first game over 15 carries. Woo! J.K. Dobbins, 17 carries last night.
For the new year.
Gus Edwards only had 3. So that's interesting usage there. That's the biggest disparity I've ever seen between J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I think Edwards was healthy. It didn't seem like it was any situation where he was hurt or anything. So I wonder if the Ravens are going to lean on Dobbins next season. So, if the Bengals lose to the Bills tonight, then the Ravens and Bengals are going to play for the division next week. And that's going to be a game where they have to win, obviously. So we'll see if the Ravens, what kind of split will be between Dobbins and Edwards next week, right? So that's going to be huge. I feel like these two games is going to be an interesting sample size to kind of evaluate J.K. Dobbins for next season. Right? So I'll be looking out for that a little bit.
It's definitely encouraging to see him, obviously break that 15 carry threshold, but also, out touch Gus Edwards the way that he did. And he didn't look bad doing it. Obviously 17 for 93 isn't, you're not sounding an alarm for that. He didn't score. He ended up with 9.3 points, which is, equivalent to those 93 yards. He didn't have any work in the passing game. Can't really expect that at this point from the Ravens offense. But, he's intriguing for next season. I'm not sure I'm going to be targeting him, just like I haven't been the past couple of years, obviously for different reasons. But he has decent enough upside that he could be like we said, low, mid RB2, and he has high RB2 potential, I think, weekly. Obviously, it's way too early to project, but this is much more encouraging seeing him outsnap Gus Edwards the way he did, especially with the way they've employed, a complete platoon at running back this whole season. It looks like he might be starting to get a little bit more of a grip on this backfield.
Gus Edwards is going to be on the Ravens next year. Okay. He's under contract until 2024. Number one. Number two, I think, so J.K. Dobbins is going to be 1 year removed from the ACL injury. So that's good, right? That's a positive. That's what you want. And then if he has a big disparity in touches next week against the Bengals, something to keep an eye on. I think that's something that's a positive for him because all I want to see is willingness from John Harbaugh to give him all the work.
Right.
That's because otherwise the ceiling is capped.
Does that fall in that category? Last night's performance of him willing to give him all the work?
Yeah, it does. But I want to see more than one game sample.
Right. That's true.
If I see two in these must-win games, then that tells me something. Now, am I going to completely depend on a 2-game sample size? I don't know. Let's see. Like if they make the playoffs, if they do end up beating Cincinnati somehow next week, then there is a chance that they have a playoff. Well, actually, no,
the Ravens are
no matter what.
They clinched. Yeah.
So we have a chance to see a 3-game sample size now.
Yeah. That's why
at least a 2.
I said that a couple weeks ago. I said, how are the Ravens clinched already? Like the way they've been playing. It's just
and they have a chance to win the AFC North, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Obviously, Lamar's been hurt, but the offense as a whole has just not been good. So it's just like watching their games has been such, it's been almost torture. I don't understand how they're even 10-6. It feels more like an 8-8 team. The Lions feel like they should be 10-6. But obviously, they had that rough start.
It's been bad, but of course, Mark Andrews is going to come through in Week 17. Of course, right?
Yeah.
He had his first 100-yard game since Week 6. First game above 63 receiving yards since Week 11. His first game with at least 6 catches since Week 11, and his first top 5 finish since Week 6. And of course, the week when people are thinking about benching him, and I'm sure a lot of people did for whoever.
Yep.
He comes through with a decent day. He didn't score a touchdown, so he didn't have a monster day, but he had a decent enough day where he caught a bunch of passes for 100 yards.
Yeah, I mean, remember, we pretty much replaced Mark Andrews with Evan Ingram.
Yeah.
And Evan Ingram had a terrible week. So, of course, it's not like you could project that. Obviously, that's what we're trying to do with the rankings every week. But, of course, like you said, Mark Andrews comes through this week with 100 yards. There's not much to say about this. Of course, that's the only thing you can say. Of course. I've said that like 5 times. There's no reason to think this is going to continue. I don't think, at least this season. I'm not fading him next season. I think Mark Andrews can get back to being who he is.
He's probably going to be a value next year.
Yeah, he absolutely could be. But the thing is, all tight ends outside of Travis Kelce are going to be a value. And honestly, I agree. I wasn't big on tight ends early in drafts going into this season. But the way that they played this season, oh my God. I don't want to see any tight ends outside of Travis Kelce going maybe in the first 3 rounds. I would leave tight ends off the table until then, because it seems like you have a better shot at picking up upside late in drafts than you do trying to shoot for a guy like Kyle Pitts or taking Mark Andrews this season. None of these guys are consistent enough to be drafted up there with Kelce, and there's no reason to be taking them over other receivers who have a lot more upside too, because there's always talent at receiver. So for me, tight ends are being faded next season, 100%. at least at a high price. The price is right the price can be right for any player where they become a value, and that's like one of the rules of fantasy football. But just tight ends, I don't see the positional value weighing up.
I can't wait, at least with the tight end crop that we have right now.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it comes down to, is the tight end crop that we have right now. But I'm curious to see how much these prices get deflated next year, because I'm sure there's going to be some values that we could pick out for sure. Yeah. I'm just glad I was fading Mark Andrews pretty heavily this year. I was pretty I was pretty loud about it too. A lot of people didn't understand that one.
Yeah.
It didn't really, it was it was like Lamar Jackson wasn't even targeting him a whole lot. But in the beginning of the year with Lamar, he was just fine this year. So that was not looking good for me early on. But later on in the season, he didn't come through. But at the end of the day, Mark Andrews came through in week 17 when you needed it, if you started him, obviously.
Yeah. And the other thing about Mark Andrews, you figure, obviously they have Rashad Bateman, and a lot of people have Rashad Bateman as their breakout, but he got injured and, he missed pretty much all the season, essentially, where he was an afterthought. You have to figure, okay, Rashad Bateman goes down, Lamar Jackson's still your quarterback. You should be having big games, right? As like the lone pass catcher and someone that obviously has rapport with Lamar Jackson, and that never happened. So it's like, how do we move forward from this? Like, does he have that type of upside anymore? Like, he hasn't shown it all season since week 6. And that seems to be the key, obviously all of these firsts since week 6. And it was an all right day. He had 100 yards receiving, but still no score. It was just disappointing this season. I don't know how I feel about Mark Andrews. Left a sour taste in my mouth moving forward. So we'll see where he goes. I don't want to draft him high.
I hear that, man. Let's see. As good of a matchup Aaron Rodgers and his wide receivers had, none of the Packers wide receivers came through. As a matter of fact, everyone that you needed to come through in this game didn't. You see this matchup and you're like, this has a ton of fantasy points written all over it. But nope. The Packers were up all game. They had a pick 6. They had a special teams return touchdown. The game script was absolutely terrible for these wide receivers. Christian Watson, 1 catch for 11 yards. Absolutely brutal in an amazing spot. You run this simulation 100 times, 80 times, you probably have a much more competitive game, right? Dalvin Cook also suffered because of the game script as well. Ended up with only 9 carries with Green Bay going up early. And then Justin Jefferson.
That's the biggest thing for me,
1 catch for 15 yards. Jair Alexander followed him on 65% of his routes and basically shut him down. He did the gritty after one of the incompletions, and that was really early in the game. And I was like, uh-oh. But he backed up his talk, man. And he backed up the early trash talk, and he backed up the early gritty. And he single-handedly might have crushed a ton of fantasy championships.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't help that Kirk Cousins was not playing well either. Obviously, it was just a rough game for the whole Vikings team overall. You look at the box score. Not the box score, but you look so much at the way that the score was for the game. 41-17, you think, okay, this has to be pretty high scoring, like you said, for the Packers. No, I don't think anybody had over 20 points. Nobody had over 18 points, I don't think. Aaron Rodgers ended up with 16. He only threw for 1 touchdown. He ran a touchdown in. Aaron Jones had 111 empty yards. No touchdowns for him. A.J. Dillon, of course, scores that touchdown. Like, all the guys, like you said, that were supposed to do well didn't. Robert Tonyan had a touchdown. Like, what's he doing getting the touchdown over Christian Watson? It makes no sense. The Packers defense was obviously the star of the day. It gave them short fields. They didn't have to do a whole lot. It seemed like every time I was checking back on this game, the Packers were in the red zone. Like, they were about to punch a touchdown in. I tune away for 5 minutes, come back. Oh, they're back in the red zone. They're about to put another touchdown in. It was just a rough game for the Vikings overall. But the biggest thing for me, like I said, Justin Jefferson having only 1 catch for 15 yards. Like, I'm not worried about Justin Jefferson at all, but this is just terrible.
That was bad, man.
You got to feel bad if you're Justin Jefferson. I mean, obviously, he's probably not thinking like Austin Ekeler did, but like, you got trash talk during the week, you got gritted on during the game, and you had nothing to say about it.
He was mad, dude. He was so upset, man. He almost took a ref out.
Yeah, did you see he almost Myles Garretted the ref? Like, that was bad. He caught him on the shoulder. It was close. It didn't look good,
dude.
But
that could have been really bad for Justin Jefferson right there. That was a bad look, man. He was extremely frustrated the entire game, and he was pissed when Jair was doing the gritty. He was like complaining to the ref. He's like, look, he's taunting.
Yeah.
But no, he did it walking away from him, so he got away with it.
That's the kind of stuff I would let go as a ref. Like this is what people come to see. You know what I'm saying?
This is the popcorn right here, man. Get your popcorn ready, man. That's what it was. So
I thought
props to Jair Alexander because he was being shit on this week for his comments.
Yeah, by me too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I was.
Oh, yeah, 100%. He said it was a fluke. And we're like, all right, well, I think I said it on the podcast, right? I said, well, okay, well, are you going to shadow him now? And he did.
Yeah.
And he shut him down.
So Jair Alexander, he had a very good game. I think this season still he's a bit overrated, but this game I called him overrated overall. Shut me right up. So that was a good game by Jair Alexander, but just too bad for the fantasy players out there. Us especially. We want to see Justin Jefferson do his thing. He didn't. But Jair Alexander's defense, they did score a lot of points if you play team defense in fantasy. So that was the story of the day.
So yeah, I was going up against AJ Brown this week, right? He was being shut down the entire game. And then all of a sudden he has that 78-yard catch and run touchdown. That's really all he did all game, right? Like he pretty much had like 1-2 points like coming up to that, like at the end of the third quarter. Yeah. And he still ended up coming through with a 20-point performance in PPR. And that's why like AJ Brown is the man. Yeah. And by the way, do you remember before the season when no one wanted to believe me when I said that AJ Brown would be a wide receiver 1 on the Eagles? Oh, yeah. And that this move to the Eagles was actually good for him. It didn't really work out for all those people, right? No. And he's actually finished as the overall wide receiver 5 on the year. Let's see what Stephon Diggs does tonight, right? But and Jamar Chase. But as of right now, the overall wide receiver 5 on the year.
Doesn't matter. He's going to finish as a wide receiver 1. Easily. Solid wide receiver 1. Even if he falls 2 spots. Wide receiver 7 on the year. Absolutely. And then Devontae Smith, too. I think he's a wide receiver 9 right now. And that's a lot of this, credit. A lot of people, the reason they were, hesitant about AJ Brown was because Jalen Hurts. We wanted to see if he was going to take that next step as a passer. And he absolutely did. And that's the kind of return you get when your passer, ascends to another level as far as, his passing and just the offense overall goes. AJ Brown had a big season this season. Obviously, it should have been a quieter day for AJ Brown, but he did luck out with that touchdown. Outside of that was one of those fluke touchdowns. Gardner Minshew didn't look at all like he did last week. Like, I don't know where this performance came from. I was genuinely surprised. I was hoping, obviously, as a Cowboys fan, that the Eagles would lose. They did. The Saints, they just played well on defense. AJ Brown got his touchdown. That's all you can really say about this one. He salvaged the day. That's how this game went. Otherwise, if he didn't have that touchdown, it's one play, it would be a fantasy dud in the championship round.
But that's why you want guys like AJ Brown. You want guys like Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the guys that could change it all on just one play.
Right.
That's it, man. That's what it comes down to. Carson Wentz, absolutely terrible against the Browns.
We're gonna go.
It looks like Ron Rivera.
Carson Wentz. Ew.
Sorry, man. Bad transition there. Ron Rivera made the wrong decision here, man, and it probably cost that team a playoff spot. And you add the fact that Rivera didn't know that they could get eliminated with the Packers winning.
I was just gonna say that. I was gonna say, wait, they could be eliminated. It could cost them a playoff spot.
He's getting fired after next week. And
you have to imagine.
because of that decision, none of the Commanders' wide receivers came through either.
No. But you look at it, Jahan Dotson, he got the target share. Obviously, Curtis Samuel was quiet, but Terry McLaurin was out-targeted by Jahan Dotson, and that was one of the more predictable things, with Carson Wentz at quarterback. We said that would happen. Outside of that one drive, they went 21 plays and end up with Carson Wentz score a touchdown on the ground. If Carson Wentz didn't have that touchdown on the ground, oh, my goodness, that would just be a terrible, terrible fantasy performance. It was bad anyway.
I started him.
Yeah.
I started him in the Superflex League over Mac Jones. And I was feeling really bad about that.
Okay, well, listen.
If he didn't score that touchdown, that would have been bad.
Does anyone blame you, of starting Carson Wentz over Mac Jones if you're looking for upside in the championship round? If that's the situation you're in, I put Carson Wentz in too. So I don't blame you. The other thing in this game, Brian Robinson, we said he was a really good start this week. 24 carries for 87 yards. That's what they call empty calories, folks. Like, we just saw that, I forget who it was. Aaron Jones had 111 yards in empty calories. That's the kind of thing that'll kill you because you'll look at it. He'll get 24 carries and 87 yards like he did. No touchdowns. It leaves you with single-digit fantasy performance. He didn't have any receiving work. That all went to Jonathan Williams, which why are they doing that? I don't know. I know what's his name. Antonio Gibson was out, but Brian Robinson, a lot of people were high on him this week, including us, including I know Steve over at Fantasy Guys. He just put up.
But I'll say this though. Everybody was talking about Antonio Gibson being out, and then that's why they like Brian Robinson, and I did not agree with that at all.
You look at the matchup.
I was high on Brian Robinson coming into the week, and I did not think his role was going to change at all, even if Antonio Gibson played. Like, I think it would have been the same result.
He probably would have got his 24 carries, yeah.
I think
20
so.
plus, yeah.
Because the games leading up to this, Antonio Gibson wasn't that involved in the rushing game anyway, and we saw Brian Robinson get 20 plus carries even with Gibson on the field.
Right.
So I did not expect him to get the receiving work. I didn't expect him to get any more of a snap share or anything like that. But the fact that he got this with Washington being down all game, right, trying to catch up was a miracle to me. So imagine if the game script was like, okay, like imagine if this was like a close game, right?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of was a close game, for a lot of it, and then Deshaun Watson kind of came back, and Amari Cooper getting it done, 2 touchdowns on like 3 catches, right, in this game, in an away game,
uncharacteristic,
by the way.
Yeah. What the heck's that about?
But yeah,
interesting.
It does suck.
With Brian Robinson, does this tell you all you need to know? Obviously you weren't super high on Brian Robinson coming into the season. I don't think you've moved much higher on Brian Robinson. Does this tell you all you need to know about his fantasy ceiling and value? Is he just a volume play forever and ever? Because he was not efficient at all, and he hasn't been all season.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, he got a little bit better in terms of efficiency, but I'm not a big Brian Robinson guy. I think he's really good in short yardage. I think that's his strong suit. That's what I thought coming into the NFL, and it still is. I think if I were them, I would bring in a compliment. I still think this is going to be. Well, you never know who the coach is going to be. Remember, this is somebody that this coaching staff drafted, right? Brian Robinson, and at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, who's going to come in as the next kind of coach, and do they want somebody else as their running back, somebody a little bit more dynamic, somebody who could potentially catch the ball out of the backfield. They have somebody, Antonio Gibson.
Oh yeah, that
guy. Forgot about him. Anyway, moving on. Justin Fields, he was on his way to a huge day. He didn't do anything at all after the first quarter, though. Like, he did all his fantasy work in the first quarter. This man needs a true number 1 wide receiver. Darnell Mooney, he's going to be fully recovered from his ankle injury, but he's better suited as like a really good number 2 wide receiver. And I think once that happens, I think Justin Fields can reach serious heights next year.
Yeah, look at so we just talked about obviously not Daniel Jones, but we said, what if Daniel Jones gets his Stephon Diggs like Josh Allen did? Well, what if Justin Fields gets his AJ Brown like Jalen Hurts did? Like, same situation, same thing going on here. Obviously, they have strides to take too, obviously on defense and as a team. But in terms of fantasy, just get him a wide receiver 1, because we knew Darnell Mooney was good, but we all know that he's, best suited to be a strong wide receiver 2. And that's nothing against him, but he's a little bit smaller. He's not a guy that's going to go high point the ball. He's a very good complementary receiver, but he's not going to be an alpha like other guys. So I think go get him a wide receiver in this draft. They have a high pick, right? Or they didn't trade that away, did they?
I don't know.
I don't know where they're drafting, but there's also guys in the market that they can go get to. I don't keep Bears information, just here on my screen.
Actually, iPad. They are. Are they number 2? I think they have the number 2 pick.
Or they have number 2 behind the Texans.
Right?
Yeah. There were a lot of trades, so don't scream at me for not knowing. There are a lot of trades.
They're at number 2 right now.
So no one's going to invest, I don't think, that high in receiver. Do you think they're trade back candidates? I mean, if they do that, they could do that. They could make. They actually
have a chance. They actually have a chance of. So if they lose next week and the Texans win,
they could go to number 1.
They can go to number 1. The Texans better not lose this game, man. I mean, I'm sorry, they better not win this game.
Yeah,
they can take. I mean, I'm assuming they're going to take Bryce Young.
I don't know. CJ Stroud looked really good. Obviously, we forget that there's a lot to talk about in those games too. But this isn't a college football podcast. We'll get to them over the course of the offseason. But yeah, I mean, they want to have their pick, the Texans, but I think the Bears, they have their quarterback, an edge rusher, what's it called, heavy draft, which it looks like that's what's going to be. Like, maybe they trade back. I don't know if they like any receivers enough to do that, but
there's no way. They're definitely taking a quarterback at 1. I can't imagine.
Oh no. I'm talking about the Bears.
Oh, he's on the Bears.
You know,
so
in a quarterback and edge heavy draft, like obviously they could go for an edge. They could go obviously when the Texans take a quarterback, you know, Will Anderson is going to be there. Jalen Carter is going to be there. Guys that they could plug in on their line. They might go there too, just because they're studs. But you know, the Bears, they have options. They have plenty of ways to go get a wide receiver one. I'm not sure if they're going to get one maybe this year. They might go quantity over quality. Hopefully not. But if Justin Fields gets a strong wide receiver, back to the point that we were making, he could see a Jalen Hurts type of jump. And that would be more towards consistency, where we've seen the ceiling, you know, this season, obviously, even without pass catchers.
For sure. And just a quick note on that backfield. Khalil Herbert, you know, him being back definitely affected David Montgomery. The opportunities was split 8-5 this week. Not great either way. Even if David Montgomery had 13 opportunities, they probably still wouldn't have been able to get it done.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm expecting a split backfield in 2023. So I'm not going to be high on David Montgomery going into next season. I've seen enough where it's possible that they just continue to ride two backs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So Cam Akers, man, like, what are we thinking about Cam Akers finish to the season? You know, he didn't score in this game, but 23 for 118 last week, 19 for 123 this week. You know, albeit against the Broncos and the Chargers, you know, two not so great run defenses. You know, he gets Seattle next week, so another soft run defense. He could get it done next week too. You know, are we going to see a resurgence from Cam Akers next year, right? Like, is he the guy the Rams are going to ride? If they don't draft anyone relatively early, I'm assuming Akers is going to be the dude.
Yeah, I think he's a candidate to kind of bounce back. And I'm not saying he's going to be a humongous bounce back, but just a return to solid fantasy relevance, I think, is on the table, definitely. Even if they draft somebody, I don't know. It looks like they're leaning on him a little bit more. It might just be because they're depleted, because, you know, it's a lost season. But this was a guy we were talking about, and they were talking about featuring heavily in the offense, you know, coming off the heels of that Super Bowl win. And obviously things haven't gone well for the Rams since then. But I look at Cam Akers, the way he's playing, he's definitely played himself back into consideration where 5 weeks ago, I mean, we weren't sure what his NFL future was going to be, you know, right. So we'll see how it goes.
And the Rams weren't sure either.
Yeah.
The Rams were trying to get rid of him, actively trying to get rid of him.
Well, not only that, he was coming off the injury, right? He was coming off the injury. He had obviously that injury that was bad. It ruined his season last season. There was a lot of hype. He came out with just dud after dud after dud. And now these past few weeks, he's gone over 13 points in 4 or 5 weeks in terms of fantasy performances. And he scored 6 touchdowns over the last 5. He looks like he can do it for the Rams. You know, if they get all their players back, Cooper Kupp, maybe he'll come back. We'll see how he does coming off the injury. Matthew Stafford, if he plays well enough, you know, they just start looking like the Rams again. Maybe we're looking at a value, because I think even if he has another fantastic game at the end of the season, his value is going to be severely deflated next season.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting. We'll see what that depth chart looks like going into next year. All right, so let's try to wrap this up real quick. So a couple guys, you know, couldn't get it done, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown, you know, didn't really show that ceiling over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
You know, Jared Goff and these play calls, man, all about these random tight ends scoring. You know, like 5 touchdowns to like random tight ends over the last 2 weeks. You know,
3 to Shane Zylstra last week and 2 to Brock Wright this week.
It's crazy, dude. But hopefully you were able to overcome Amon-Ra. This was his lowest yardage total since week 9.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He didn't even leave you hanging. You know, he still put up 10 points. I mean, that's not a whole lot, but it's not leaving you hanging like, I don't know, who
Garrett
else
Wilson.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson.
You know, not being able to come through. Like, the Seahawks have been very, very good against wide receivers. I really thought that Garrett Wilson, you know, would be able to overcome the matchup, but he couldn't. You know, despite getting 11 targets, you know, same with Mike White. You know, this matchup seemed to be too much for this offense. You know, I liked Mike White this week, but now the Jets are officially eliminated from the playoffs. So that sucks. And then Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, same thing on the other side, right? They couldn't get anything going against the Jets this week. You know, DK Metcalf 1 catch for 2 yards in this game.
Yeah. So are the Jets corners just kryptonite for fantasy at this point? You know, receivers, like, it looks like whoever plays them. We just saw it the week before with Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. They all had duds. It's just like,
it has happened all year long, man. And a bunch of stud wide receivers, you know, couldn't overcome these tough matchups this week, right? It wasn't just these guys. It was a bunch of them, you know. Crazy. Kenneth Walker, though, 23 carries for 133 yards. It's kind of crazy to think that Tyler Algier has more rushing yards than Kenneth Walker this year, but he does, and on less carries. But Walker, I think, going into next year, he's going to have a big year.
Yeah,
next season.
He should.
Probably, I'm assuming he's going to be a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Is my guess.
I don't know if I'd take him that high. I mean, obviously, we've seen
But where do you think his ADP lands, though?
It's probably going to be high. Just looking
second
at the
round,
yeah, it would have to be. And assuming that Seahawks get better again, this season they have all those draft picks. They should be able to do well, on offense. So they should be fine. I like Kenneth Walker. Not so much. I don't think that'd be taking him in the second round unless, he has good camp. I don't know. He looks like he's doing really good. I'm not doubting Kenneth Walker. It's just he's not really my taste right now. Could change. Plenty of time between now and next season. But empty calories it was. And that's been like my MO, when it comes to breaking down these running back performances. But he had 133 yards. It just doesn't amount to much when that happens when they don't score.
Yeah, man. All right. That's going to do it for this podcast. I wish you guys the best of luck. Hopefully, a bunch of you guys have won championships. I see a few people here in our comments who already won a championship. Thomas Jefferson,
our founding father.
My first ever fantasy football championship. He's been playing fantasy football since the United States has seceded from England. So thank you, Thomas Jefferson, for your comment. Who else here? We had a couple other ones as well. Jay Small, Jerick McKinnon came through. Props to upper hand. I won my championship. That's awesome. Albert, you got Diggs and Higgins left tonight. He's down by 26. I think it's going to happen, dude.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen for you. Prince is saying that he's up 30 points. He has Higgins up against Burrow and their kicker. I think you're pretty much locked in with that W as well. So, hey, man, wish you guys the best of luck.
Yeah, especially with the having Higgins and him having Burrow, your opponent. That's one way to offset their scoring. If you have their pass catchers. That's happened to me so many times where they have my quarterback's pass catchers, and it's just like every touchdown's a net -2. Assuming it's a 4-point passing touchdown. It's just terrible. And then Hoosiers luck 89. I won second year in a row. Thanks for all the information. Got you. Hopefully, a lot of you guys have won your championship this year. I'm giving away a bunch of trophies to a bunch of champions. So, we'll talk about that on my Instagram story on Tuesday. So make sure you tune in there, and we'll talk about it, how you can get a trophy for your league, a perpetual trophy that you'll be able to pass around from. It's going to be really awkward, Zach, when I get the trophy for our league and I put my name on it first and I'm presenting it to myself. Super awkward. It's a little weird. But it is what it is. Yeah. It is what it is. All right, guys. My name will be on it then. Don't worry.
Soon enough.
Yeah.
If you can get past me.
Yeah, assuming Rashad Penny doesn't get hurt, DeAndre Swift doesn't get hurt. Obviously I was going to rely on Rashad Penny all season.
Do you want me to go through all the injuries that I had this year? Do you want me to do it? Huh?
I don't know. You made more trades than I did. I've largely stuck with my team.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
but,
Keenan Allen all year. I did just lose Jonathan Taylor. Okay, I lost Trey Lance early. That could have been something. I had to stream my QB2 all year long. Okay, let's cool it.
I'm not taking away.
Okay? Let's cool it with the excuses.
I'm not taking it away from you, Faraz. I'm just saying it's tough sometimes.
It is tough sometimes. All right, guys, take it easy. Have a good one. We'll see you guys hopefully this week. We probably won't have a podcast tomorrow because no waiver show. We're gonna take it a little easy. But we'll probably be back a little later this week. We'll let you guys know. Just keep up with Instagram, and we'll be back. See you later. Bye-bye. Peace.